Welcome to the first episode of BS in History. What is going on today, ladies and gentlemen? Dan Barron, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. It's a weird day, but then again, it's a weird year. So
yeah,
here we are.
Yeah, so who's to say that today shouldn't just be weird as all heck, you know?
I'm just getting my light panel on in the background as well.
Oh yeah, yeah. We must all now. This podcast is officially on video. We can officially see faces in this podcast, which I do wonder if that's going to impact at all our ability to read from one another in the game of BS in history that we are playing. Now, if you've watched any streams that I've done before. We play games, and today's no different. It's just not a video game. It's not a video game. It's a talking game.
Good way of putting that.
Yeah, see? It's a deception game. Woo! And it's history, kind of. It is 66% history.
It is history. Thank you so much.
It's mostly history. So we'll describe it, but Dan, you and we've done this before. Like, how many? 8 times? How many times did we actually do this? Record an episode of BS? Was it 10?
Yeah, I think if we aren't at 10, we are very near 10.
Okay, yeah.
And a good way to put it, guys, if we've recorded all of these, and this is the first one that anyone else besides us has heard. So
yeah.
We're very excited.
Yeah, this is the first time anybody has ever actually heard or participated in BS in history, even though we've recorded a lot of episodes. So we're hoping to make the archived episodes available to subscribers of Redgrave TV. And we'll have to talk about how that works because we've got some co-plugging to do here as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's mainly let's plug Redgrave TV because you become famous. I'm going to ride those coattails.
Here we go. Yeah, let's just...
That's fine.
Now, to really quickly address chat, periodically something will be popping up in the chat describing what today is all about. We are recording a podcast, so there might be a little less chat interaction. To answer a question that's already out there, chat points aren't going to go into effect today, so I won't be doing a Rubik's Cube in the middle of the podcast, which is one of my chat point rewards that you can redeem, is that I do a Rubik's Cube in the middle of a game of Overwatch. We won't be doing that. But we are going to be playing a game and we're excited for people to play along. So let's get right into BS in history. Dan, do you want to describe how this game works or should I?
Sure.
Do you want to go for it?
Sure. Everyone here, I would hope, is at least moderately familiar with the game Two Truths and a Lie. Right?
I played it.
Simple game. Yeah. You might have played it in school. You may have played it at work, wherever it might be. The idea of it being that as a way of introducing yourself, you tell 3 stories, one of which is a lie, and everyone has to figure out what the is. Well, we thought, wouldn't that be fun with historical stories? So we came up with the idea for BS in history, where we each share 3 stories around a specific subject, where one of those stories is an absolute fabrication from beginning to end. No part of it, well, okay, not no part of it. I'm sure there's little pieces that are true, but most of it is just absolute bunk. But we are challenged to make it sound as true as possible. And in the process, you're going to learn 2 new things from history, and you might even learn the BS version of one where you accidentally quote it years down the line and you can't remember where you heard it from.
I have this problem where after we record these episodes, I think about the fake stories and I go, that's really interesting. And then I go, wait, no, he made that up. Now, we have a few rules that we've put into place to make sure that this stays fun. First and foremost is that we will not try to trip each other up in the sense that we won't tell a 99% true story and then slip one fact in there that's fake that we made up and try to say that story was fake.
What fun is that?
Yeah, exactly. The goal is to completely make up a piece of history that does not exist, to engage our creative writing brains a little bit, and try to trick each other into believing the BS that we've written. So, yeah.
And who would we be as creatives if all we did was change like one fact in a story? No, it is about building A lie that is so good that you make the other person question their existence.
Yeah. Sometimes rooted in some history that you think you remember to be true, but not necessarily. The other
Do you
thing
remember?
is...
Do you remember our score? Where are we at score?
Oh, I forgot we were scoring this. Yeah, we had built up a whole scoreboard. No, I do not remember. We're starting over today.
Of course,
I think you were
losing,
winning.
that's why.
I think you were. Yeah, exactly. You were winning. So now we've given each other topics. We have these out. Should we flip a coin or should we say who's? No, we'll just we'll introduce our topics as we go.
Yeah. We can.
All right, Dan. Well, let's flip.
Up to you. I'll let you choose. It's your stream. I'm doing the most like Jewish pass off. It's your stream. It's your thing.
You take care of it.
It's yours.
All right. Well, let's see. Then I elect. No, we're going to flip a coin. Here we go. You ready, Dan? Call it heads or
I'm ready.
tails. It's your call, though.
Always heads.
Siri, flip a coin.
It's tails.
All right.
2 out of 3.
All right.
2 out of 3.
2 out of 3?
No.
All right. All right. Then that means I'll go first. All right.
All right.
Now, Dan, you gave me a topic. At the end of today, we will give each other our topics for 2 weeks from now when we do this again. All right.
I definitely didn't forget that part.
Oh yeah. Oh no. You be thinking of something. Maybe this will inspire you. I have one. I'm quite excited to see you do next time. So, my topic this week was martial arts. Martial arts. And I have 3 wonderful, fascinating stories about martial arts. So join me as we learn a little bit about the fascinating history of martial arts. Are you ready?
Oh, I'm ready.
All right.
I've got my thinking pose on. If you haven't been able to tell, this is...
All right, so first, Dan, you know about the world of martial arts. So you have to know a little bit about the world of martial arts. Looks like we even have people in chat who are black belts in martial arts. So they really, there's some rooting I think we all have having taken karate in elementary school. But do you know about the oldest martial art?
I can't say that I do.
I know. No one does. It's so interesting. No one knows about the oldest martial art. Now, let me ask you this. Could you guess maybe where the oldest martial art was founded?
If I had to guess just based on the location of the majority of forms of martial arts, I would say China, specifically Mongolia, perhaps, but I would guess in that region, in Asia. Let's just go Asia.
You're definitely right about Asia. And in fact, we have some people in chat saying that it's wrestling. It's wrestling is what they're saying. And they are not 100% wrong.
Ooh.
Now, by the way...
Oh, yeah. Greco-Roman. That would be a martial art. I feel like such a fool.
One addendum we forgot to get to is I will ask chat not to completely give away the answer. At least don't go Google the answer. Feel free to give your thoughts and opinions. Don't go Googling.
I closed chat because I realized that you're going first, so I don't want to
never
read it
mind.
while we're going.
Never mind.
Still,
there is some evidence to suggest that wrestling and even boxing might be some of the oldest forms of martial arts on the planet. I know, yeah. There are actually murals on ancient murals in Egypt that sort of depict early wrestling moves as a way of fighting. And it's same with boxing, just from a very philosophical standpoint. Boxing is considered to be one of the oldest forms of fighting, of organized fighting. But as far as a martial art goes, what's actually considered to be the oldest martial art began in India around 1000 BCE. Around 1000 BCE, the oldest, what I would say, the most, what's the word I want to look for? Sort of a standardized and philosophical martial art, right? It's teachable and it's something that's repeatable and learnable. And the name of this martial art is, and I'm going to butcher it, Kalari Payattu. Also known as Kalari, which is how I will refer to it from here on out.
There we go.
Okay. So the oldest martial art, Kalari, began in India around 1000 BC. Now, Kalari is mostly about applying pressure to human pressure points in areas that have been studied and researched to be sensitive spots on the human body. So These are practitioners of Kalari possess intricate knowledge of pressure points of the human body and healing techniques that incorporate knowledge of things like yoga. So there's old sort of yoga philosophies built into the methodology of this. Like a lot of early martial arts, it's taught that it's a way of life. It's not just a combat, right? It's how you approach your day-to-day. It's how you think about the world is through the lens of Kalari. So students are taught that it's a way of life with a sense of compassion, discipline, respect towards the master, their fellow students and parents in the community. So it comes along with this way of approaching your day-to-day. Now, it is not considered to be a particularly violent or combative martial art. In fact, a particular emphasis is placed on avoiding confrontational situations and using the martial art only as a means of protection when no other alternative is available. And it is still practiced to date. So that's another thing to know. So there's a lot of history here dating back, to 1000 BCE, but it also shows up in a series of ballads or poems that were written called the Vatikan Patakal. These are a series of ballads, stories, and songs of sort of ancient Indian heroes. And almost all of the ballads in that work of literature show some strong connection to Kalari. A lot of old practitioners of Kalari, and in fact, of those ballads in that movie or in that book, 17 movies have been made about the various tales. Thinking about it as books of the Bible kind of thing, different movies. 17 movies actually have been made about these ballads that tell the story of Kalari and early practitioners of it. Last thing, so. The last big point that I would want to make that I think is interesting, again, it's still taught today. You can still learn it as an official practice. And it also was never a discriminatory art. It was taught to members of all castes in India, and women and men among them. No one was excluded from practicing Kalari. It was something that was part of Indian culture and open to everybody.
By the way, I'm still listening. I just realized I forgot to turn my little baby monitor off, so that way you guys don't hear crying in the background. I'm going to turn that off while he's talking.
Hey, there you go. So this is what we know about Kalari. Again, a very, very ancient martial art, but something that, ironically, the oldest martial art in the world, still available, still in practice today, and still a common study in the world of martial arts. And that is what is widely considered to be the oldest martial art.
Here's a quick clarification. Was that your first story, or were you just giving me an introduction to that subject?
That was my first story, a lot more of a description than a story. Now, I do think that
I was listening with that in mind, but I realized halfway through that might have been what you were doing.
That was the whole thing. Now, another addendum to this as well, viewers, is that we are given, is it just one question over the entirety? One question per story. Never mind, one question. So we can ask one question per story of one another to try to clarify, and that can be used to either pick apart a particularly vulnerable fact that we believe that we've noticed, or just to get more information to see how the person reacts. So, yeah, any questions about that?
Yeah, I guess... So my question becomes, because you obviously would have looked into Kalari a little bit while writing this.
Yeah.
Why is it that, and maybe this was covered, why is it that things like yoga became popular or mainstream versus something like Kalari?
That's a really good question. I mean, I think that Kalari seems to be a lot less approachable than something like a yoga. So that actually does bring up another point, which is that Kalari does integrate weaponry into its style. So things like stick fighting, but also things like axes. I think I have some of this stuff written down, or I might have forgotten to write it down. But spears, swords, shields, and bows are often integrated into the style of Kalari. So you probably have seen this art practiced potentially if you've seen certain forms of stick fighting that have come out of India. That's often, I think, there's forms of Kalari that are classified as stick fighting. I think this is the words I saw on the internet. So I would say that's probably why, because there's hardware.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense.
And it's also dangerous.
Yeah, well, sure, but who cares?
Yeah, no, who cares about that? All right, that was your question. Are you ready for story number 2?
I'm ready for.
The story number 2 is called The Rise of Li Fu. The Rise of Li Fu.
Glad you titled this. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I titled all of them. The first one was called The Oldest Martial Art. This one is called
Got it. Okay.
The Rise of Li Fu. Now, I love this title, and I like that I called it that because the martial art itself is called Li Fu. But the art itself is fashioned after Elmar Leichenberg, who is a German wrestler. So in the late 1800s, Elmar Leichenberg, and by the way, I want to make sure I still have you there. Do we still have you live?
Yeah.
Okay,
Sorry,
cool. You're sitting quite still.
I'm very good at that.
You gotta move a little bit so that I know you exist. Sorry. The benefits of having cameras in place. So in the late 1800s, Elmar Leichenberg, he's a German wrestler from... You're really doing it, man. You're gonna freak me out. He's a German wrestler from the German town of Mainz, which is near Frankfurt. And he is known as the father of professional bodybuilding. All right?
Okay.
Right. So he's a wrestler, but he's known as the father of professional bodybuilding. So, which you might know, but either way, the interesting fact here is that there was actually a short-lived style of martial art that was born from his particular style of wrestling, and we'll get into why bodybuilding came about a little bit later. But there was a short-lived style of martial art that was popular only in Germany as a result of his style of wrestling. So I can't do this looking at you. I'm gonna have to cover your face. There we go. All right. So Li Fu, which was named by the Germans as a portmanteau, literally of Leichenberg. It may be Li Fu or Li Fu. Either way, it's L-E-I, Leichenberg, right? So probably Li Fu, however they would say it. Literally a portmanteau of Leichenberg and Kung Fu. And it's not very creative, but the reason was in sort of Western culture towards the late 1800s, towards the turn of the century. Towards the turn of the 19th century. Eastern culture had become really popular and was becoming steadily increasing influence in Western culture over that time. So there was an increased interest in martial arts. And Li Fu was not as much a martial art as much it was a bloody, sort of brawling style of fighting. So it was sort of characterized by taking advantage of opponents' most sensitive targets, such as ears, tongue, and, you guessed it, as I put on there, and the blurry part of the screen.
I was thinking maybe eyeballs. I thought maybe this was like American, what was it, Deep Wood fighting in America?
I did read something about eye gouging.
Yeah,
it did.
That was big here.
Yeah, was that big here? All right, so now the reason for this, and the reason I don't
derail your story.
No, you're good.
That was how I think Daniel Boone got famous, was as a backwoods fighter. Anyway,
oh my gosh,
I could be wrong on that, so I don't want to espouse that.
Well, I think that eye gouging was I only read this as a secondary part of it because, and you'll hear why, in official wrestling matches, Leichenberg would use the threat of damage to those key parts, especially such as ears and tongue and sensitive body parts, as a way to sort of entice his opponents into momentary submission and then take advantage of the defensiveness that's created when you attack a part that's sensitive like that. He was not particularly in the business of ripping those things off. However, while Leichenberg never did any permanent damage, the moves were the genesis of Li Fu, and that fighting style included several below-the-belt maneuvers, which on more than one occasion resulted in dismemberment of the opponent. Not in the wrestling ring when it was practiced unofficially as a sort of movement in Germany. So in that regard, I think that's where I read about eye gouging. So Leichenberg himself was not a particular proponent of ripping off sensitive body parts, but so Li Fu was never recognized in any official capacity as a fighting style or something that's teachable, right? But the genesis of a short-lived wave of underground German fighting rings were built around this style of fighting until such rings were outlawed around the turn of the century. So Elmar himself never took place in any of those sort of... He was not a proponent of the words Li Fu, nor did he take place in any of those rings. But he also stopped wrestling to begin focus more on physique, which led to the popularity of, as it was deemed at the time, bodybuilding, which was also around the same time, also around the turn of the century. And he was sort of the genesis of the bodybuilding movement around that time. That's the end of that story.
I don't know. I don't know if I have a question for this one. It does this sound German? Of course it sounds German. What you know what? Because I might have missed it. This will be my question. What was the year span of this again? When was this popular?
From what I read, it was around 1880 and later. I think he was a wrestler in the 1880s. I don't think that you probably saw this, the fighting rings and the fighting style that was generated from his influence until probably the 1890s. It sounded like, from reading, it was rather quickly squashed. And it stated that it was squashed at the turn of the century, so around 1900. So, yeah, my guess is probably a very short while in the late 1890s.
Okay.
All right. So we are into our final story. Now, our final story requires a little bit of a preamble. Preamble being that I recently watched Shanghai Noon for the first time.
Not Shanghai Nights? You didn't go for both?
No, is that the sequel?
There's a sequel, Shanghai Nights.
Oh, this is great.
In England.
This is where my wife is gonna hit up chat and start to talk about this. So we watched Shanghai Noon because she likes that movie and she thinks of it like it's a fun movie, and we had a blast, had a good time.
Oh, it has Owen Wilson in it. How can it not be fun?
Right. It is rather funny seeing how comedy has evolved a little bit, but also it was a really light, nice, fun-hearted movie, and it was fun. I also had not seen anything with Jackie Chan in a while. Yeah, right? So I use this as an excuse to do a little Jackie Chan research.
Great. Can't wait.
I call this story Jackie Chan and the Triad Gangs. So you know that Jackie Chan famously does his own stunts.
Sure. Everyone knows that.
But did you know he's a stone cold killer in real life?
No, I don't think anyone knows that.
He's not a killer. He hasn't killed anybody. But he came damn close. So the story as it's recounted is that Jackie Chan, once during his film career, Jackie Chan came under threat from the notorious Triad Gangs of Hong Kong. All right. Now, this is a series, sort of, you can think of this as the five families in the mafia, right? The Triad Gangs of Hong Kong, an underground sort of mob gang of what he would call gun-wielding villains in Hong Kong. So he came under threat from them. No one's quite sure why. Perhaps as punishment for the illicit criminal activities his father took place in as a nationalist spy. Perhaps they were trying to get a taste of the opium his mother smuggled as a member of the Shanghai underworld. Those might all be the reasons. Because those are all part of the story. Those are all facts. But no one's quite sure why. Either way, whatever the reason, while shooting films in Hong Kong, he and other actors a part of the movies that he was shooting would be commonly extorted and threatened by these gun-wielding villains. It happened so frequently that he began sort of just, he had a common response. That response was generally just to flee and hide in the United States. So after shooting, not shooting of guns, after shooting of the films, he would hop on a plane and fly to the U.S. and hide out in the U.S. until the threat had subsided a little bit, until one time they opened fire on him as he deboarded a plane. So he was being shot at. So Chan had had enough. At this point, he had been fired upon multiple times. So one day in Hong Kong, Jackie Chan was eating his meal outside, presumably on a picnic table, just sort of chilling, enjoying a meal outside, and more than 20 people surrounded him with melon knives, threatening to kill him. So more than 20 people surround Jackie Chan eating his meal outside in Hong Kong. He pulls out a gun, and he doesn't show them that he has 2 more guns concealed and 6 grenades. And he pulls out So he pulls out the gun, and he says, "You've gone too far." And then he pulls out a second gun, reveals the 6 grenades that he has, and then no one knows how this story ends. But he gets into a firefight holding all this weaponry, and no one is sure how this all came to an end other than that Jackie Chan survived And the Hong Kong police opened an investigation against him for the possession of firearms without a license, which is punishable by up to 14 years in prison in Hong Kong. But that case was ultimately dropped. And that is how Jackie Chan took on the Triad gangs.
So hang on. Hang on. No one knows. No one can speak to how it ended.
No.
Not even say like one of the 20 men who may or may not be alive anymore.
They're not coming out and talking about this.
Yeah, I guess that would mean admitting you're in the triad. So
Right.
it's probably not a...
No, I won't take that as your question. If you do have a specific question about the content as presented, I will still answer it.
What year was this incident?
I don't know. Hold on. Let's find out. Hold on. Let's look and see. Oh, 1 second. Let's see. Jackie Chan Triad gangs.
Yeah, I can say words while typing on my phone as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, he all right, so here's what I can say. Here's what I can say without knowing too much is that he it looks like maybe around 2001.
2001.
2001.
What? Hold on. So 2001, I'm trying to think of what movie. When did Rush Hour come out?
Oh, yeah, it's a good question here. Let's see. Rush Hour release date. I also learned that Jackie Chan hates that movie. Rush Hour came out in 1998.
Okay, so this would have been around the time of Rush Hour 2 or 3.
Potentially. Now, this also could have just been... and Teddy said 1999, so maybe he's probably right.
Don't trust
film
him.
guy. Yeah, true. This would have been just one of the instances of this happening. Now, when the incident actually took place of him getting into a firefight with the Triad gangs, I don't exactly know. I don't think it's said out loud. I do think that he talked about it around 2012, 2013. He sort of regales the story. And now I'll sip my drink while you think.
Yeah, because now I have to choose. So
You have to choose. Now, I think we have a way to allow chat, our 7 viewers here, to actually take part in this. So let's see. Oh, okay. So now Kay Gravesland has said we have our guesses and do not agree on the lie. So I'm curious here. So let's see. So I have to...
Oh, I can see your screen, so I have to look away.
Oh, what can you see? Oh, yeah. Well, the answer isn't in here. It's just...
Well, yeah, but you have a poll up. I don't even...
Well, that's true.
The audience,
Oh, 1 second. You're kind of breaking
because they
up.
might have Googled.
They might have. All right, so a poll has opened up. Chat, you can use, it looks like you say, I think, Bork, you have to do ! vote and then type what you just typed. So Bork guessed, but you have to type ! vote and then story 1, 2, or 3. Okay. Maybe. Well, you know,
So,
you just did it, so.
Let me go through my logic here.
Verbally process for us.
Yeah. So, first off, the Jackie Chan story is wild and unbelievable, which makes it the perfect story to be true in something.
Sure.
So that's my first thought. That one sounds so outlandish. There's no way that is not true. That's because why? Well, I don't know. Nathan, you're a very creative person. I hope you know that. I think you are very creative. I don't think you would have created a story of Jackie Chan getting attacked by 20 men with melon knives. So, story 3, safe in my book for the moment. Story 2, there's something about story 2 that story 2 feels true, but the timing feels wrong. The late 18th century feels like the wrong time for a German fight club. Late 19th century feels like the wrong time in history for a German fight club. But then again, they were having an economic boom. So yeah, that's the perfect time for a fight club. And then story 1 is so inconspicuous that I've also been questioning its existence because nothing about it seemed outlandish. Nothing felt off the rails. All of it felt very plausible, which is just your style. Those are the stories that you're so good at sneaking in there. You know what? I'm going to go with story 1. Story 1 is the lie.
That is your official guess. Story 1 is the lie.
As my official guess.
So now, really quickly, as a result, we've had quite a few votes in here, and the winning vote on the poll is that story 1 is the lie.
Oh God, guys, please don't make me wrong.
Story 1 got 4 votes. Story 2 got 1 vote. Oh, and we got a +1 here from a visitor at my mother's house. Who also says story 1. So the consensus is that I made up the story about the oldest martial art. I made up all those Indian names and words. I made up the literature in which this is referenced. I made up the 17 films that have been based on ballads written about this martial art. Quite specific, but sort of mundane. And the truth is often stranger than fiction, Dan, as we have learned multiple times in this. And I made up story number 2.
Oh, I was really on the fence with this.
I made up the story about Lei Fu. I don't know what that is. I made up one person's name. What did I call him? I called him Elmar Leichenberg. I said
he's a very good German name.
I said he's the father of. I looked up a map of Germany, and so yes, Kay Gravesland is the only person who guessed correctly. I made up a name. I looked up Mainz, which is near Frankfurt. There is a dude who is the father of bodybuilding. I think he's from Prussia. Did not borrow any details. No idea about that guy, or even time frame. And that's it. Lei Fu was never a thing. Leichenberg Kung Fu portmanteau, not real.
You know, I'm disappointed in myself more than anything because there was a point in story 2. I think it was when I asked my question, when I asked when, where you didn't really have a firm answer, and I literally marked that in my head and thought, "Ooh, okay, that's a good sign."
Right.
But there was something I thought story 1 was bullshit from the beginning. I was thinking it was bullshit when you finished. I was in my head. I was like, that is so innocuous. I should have let that go.
We do find often in this game that the stories that we find that are true are funnier and crazier than the ones that we make up. When the stories are so crazy that the one we make up can be equally, if not higher or more as crazy, that's always really fun. But so commonly, truth is literally stranger than fiction in this.
I want to know more about this Jackie Chan story.
Oh yeah, dude. Oh, all right. So here's the one. Here's the one bit is that this is all alleged from Jackie Chan's mouth. Now that being said, the Hong Kong police did look into an incident like this in 2001. Because I googled, that's the date that I found. Most of the news articles you'll find about this are when he told this story in 2012, and then after he told it to, I think, a Chinese newspaper, the Hong Kong police were like, "What?" And then they opened a police investigation because they're like, "You can't do that, nor can you talk about it in the news. You can't go to a magazine and tell a story about how you wielded 6 grenades against the Triad gangs." And so they investigated it, but dropped it for lack of evidence.
Amazing.
Oh, and
Amazing.
his mother was his mother was an opium
I'm
smuggler, and his father was an illicit criminal.
So I knew his background, or at least I knew there was some sordid pieces to his background. I think I had read that once because they were also talking about his years in the circus.
Right.
But yes, that man, I'm glad he's okay.
He's good. He's good.
Staying safe.
Dan, it's good to be back BS in history, man.
Yeah,
this is fun.
You're just happy because you won a round.
I am. I'm so happy because I won a round, and I even fooled chat. I got a 4-1 vote.
Now I know.
Shout out to my mom, though. She got it.
On my side, that means nothing.
All right. Hey, we are going to do a quick ad break, super fast, 60-second ads, and then we're going to be back with Dan telling his stories about
the space race.
Here we go. Boom. Nice. Hey, we're intermission. We're still recording, so we're here. We're still live. If you're watching this,
Oh,
you might be
cool.
on YouTube. Yeah, Dan, you gotta put your mask up for the YouTube fans who aren't watching the ad right now.
Hey there, YouTube fans. This is Dan from the Go Folk Yourself podcast, here to tell you Go Folk Yourself will be returning on July 3rd. So subscribe today.
Oh man. Yeah. Oh yeah. Think about what you want to challenge me here at the end to do for next time.
Yeah.
And we'll do a Go Folk Yourself shout out here at the end of the episode too.
I got some ideas. I got some.
I've got a good one, and Tabitha helped me come up with this one. It was her idea, and I quite like it, especially having done just a modicum of research to make sure there was enough detail there. There's plenty. It is an open forum for you to be creative, and I'm excited.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
It'll be good. All right, 2, 1. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We are back with BS
Hi,
in
everybody.
History. We're on the other side of it. It is time for Dan Jam Barker to tell me his 3 stories about the space race. Now, I'm going to hide chat so that I don't get any indication from chat about what is true and what is a lie here. But for those of you who are watching and potentially still or haven't heard, we're telling each other 2 truths and a lie. Whoops, there we go. And in historical stories, and Dan's about to tell 3 stories about the space race.
Yeah.
We're gonna figure
Now
out
I
which one's
do
fake.
I have a preamble that I'm going to go through because I wrote up a piece. This was originally going to be one of my true stories, but as I finished writing it, it was just a really good origin for the space race in general. So I'd like to go through this because a lot of people don't know how the space race began. So this is not one of the stories. This is very important. This is the kickoff of the actual space race. The first leg of the space race was a different kind of race. In September of 1944, Nazi Germany began launching what was known as the V-2 rocket, or the Retribution rocket. The V-2 was a guided ballistic missile that was developed to fire at Allied cities and military bases. It was unique to other ballistics at the time in that it was the first object ever launched past the Kármán line, and thus the first object launched into space. It was developed by Werner von Braun, Werner von Braun, and this technology was used to hit cities like London and Antwerp. And by the end of the war, it was estimated to have caused over 9,000 casualties. When Nazi Germany fell, the Allied forces, the US, UK, and USSR, raced to seize this technology, seeing the value that it would have. It was anybody's guess who was going to gain the advantage. The US was able to capture enough V-2 hardware to build about 80 of the missiles. They also found Werner von Braun and 100 key V-2 personnel, and they surrendered to the Americans, and many of them actually relocated to the Redstone Arsenal here. However, the Soviets captured the V-2 manufacturing facility and relocated them to the USSR. It was this quest for advanced weaponry that set both countries down a path of incredible curiosity and technological/scientific advancements.
I kind of always wondered why it seemed to be a race between America and Russia specifically, and that kind of gives a little bit of context into that.
And it was almost the UK as well, if they had found a piece of the puzzle.
Right, it was just we found the pieces of the puzzle, and we're able to build part of the puzzle to get us kickstarted. Huh.
And if you really think about it, and this is, before going into any of it, if you think about what you know about the space race, it makes perfect sense that the USSR was able to manufacture faster because they had the plants, they had the manufacturing, but we had the brains, we had the minds behind it. So it's interesting, kind of looking at it that way. So anyway, let's get into our stories. And I do apologize to those of you in chat because Nathan was very interactive. I unfortunately cannot be because I realized I'm reading these stories from my phone, which would have been my way of looking at it. But I promise I'll check in between stories and see what.
We will also reopen the poll at the end of this for trying again. So get ready to discuss your opinions and get ready to vote at the end of this.
All right. Story number 1, the Kaputnik mission. I also titled my story, so I was like,
yeah.
Stories.
Okay.
On December 6, 1957, 2 months after the Soviets launched Sputnik 1 and 2, the first artificial satellite in orbit, the U.S. tried to launch its own. The space race had really and truly begun. The Vanguard TV-3, a geodetic research satellite, was created to show that America had the same capabilities as the USSR. At its launch attempt at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station, The booster ignited and began to rise. But about 2 seconds after liftoff, after rising about 4 feet, the rocket lost thrust and fell back onto the launch. As it settled, the fuel tanks ruptured and exploded, destroying the rocket and severely damaging the launch pad. The Vanguard 1A satellite was thrown clear and landed on the ground a short distance away, with its transmitters still sending out a beacon signal. The satellite was damaged, however, and could not be reused. As a result, the Vanguard TV3 is better known now as Kaputnik. Or, if you were from the media at the time, you would have also called it Flopnik or Dudnik. The press had a lot to say about the dismal failure, many criticizing the funding and research that had just blown up before their very eyes. The following year, the U.S. finally launched its first satellite and created...
Can you say the last word again? It kind of cut out. And created what?
The following year, the U.S. finally launched its first satellite and created...
NASA. Okay, got it. Okay. All right. I was going to ask when you titled the story Kaputnik if this is where the word kaput came from, but it sounds like that was actually a joke about how this was a failure.
Correct. Yeah, they wanted to make sure that everyone knew how much of a failure. So Kaputnik, Dudnik, what was it? Kaputnik, Dudnik, or Flopnik?
What year was this again? You said it in the story or no?
I did. It was December 6th, 1957.
Okay.
So if you really think about it, only 12 years before we landed a man on the...
That's kind of what I was thinking. I don't have a question here. I don't know. It's super straightforward. There's not.
It's a very straightforward story.
You gave all the details, all the data, the dates, the names, the reason for the mission. Will you clarify that again for me? Why were we shooting this as a satellite, like a low orbit satellite?
This was a satellite. So if you're familiar with Sputnik and what Sputnik, the first Sputnik was, Russia launched, or sorry, not Russia, the USSR, the Soviet Union, launched their satellite Sputnik into space, and all it really truly did was orbit the Earth and created a beeping noise. And the reason it did that beeping noise was so that people with ham radios or short transmission or long transmission radios back on the Earth could hear it as it circled the globe, which of course was terrifying to Americans who were just starting into this Cold War mentality, just kind of settling in. So this was an effort to say, hey, don't worry about that. We here in the U.S. can do it too. So you have nothing to be afraid of. Here's our satellite.
All right.
So, yeah.
Okay, so my question is, was this the first satellite that we tried to launch?
This was, in fact, the first satellite that we attempted to launch.
And it failed. The very first thing we tried in this whole space race shenanigans just blew up. Fell.
Now, so there is... remember, I talked about the V2 missile beforehand. It is not... Our first attempt at crossing, what was it called? The Kármán line?
Yeah.
The Kármán line, I believe we had surpassed that, but putting something into Earth's orbit, which is what we're classifying as a satellite here, we had not. So this was our first attempt of putting something into orbit.
Okay.
And we failed.
Okay, good to go.
All right. The next story, the Stirlingov experiments. So let's talk about the 1960 Soviet Stirling experiment, only discovered years after the fall of the USSR in 1994. In order to understand the purpose behind the experiment, one must first understand the story of Laika. Laika was the first dog in space. Before Yuri Gagarin was the first man sent into space, the Soviet Union and the US, but this isn't about them, experimented with sending animals. The first being Laika, a terrier from the streets of Kiev. Laika did not survive his trip, and Soviet scientists had a difficult time determining why. It was not from lack of oxygen or from the high temperature. It seemed that the dog just went into shock and died. This led to Ivan Stirlingov. If I'm saying any of these words wrong, I'm so sorry, everybody. This led to Ivan Stirlingov and his team of researchers theorizing that the shock of leaving Earth was, quote, too much for the mind to bear. They believed humans were better equipped for this, as they could understand what they were doing and seeing, but the fear of this type of shock was enough for the Soviets, who had plans to send a man into space in less than a year's time, to take every precaution to test ways to remedy this. We're going to talk about one of those very weird tests. They kept their plans
okay, continue. I was going to say, am I to assume you've been telling the story up to this point, right?
Yes, all of this has been part of the...
Got it, cool.
Sorry, it's just I write it in a way like I'm actually giving a history lecture, so it's, you know.
Welcome.
Welcome, everybody. Have your seats. Let's talk about the origins of Michael the Space Dog. They kept their plans to send monkeys, rodents, cats, and more dogs to space, but this time they planned to use a small dose of LSD. The theory being that the hallucinogenic nature of these drugs would soften the blow that the launch and the journey would cause. They tested LSD on animals in high G environments to study the effects of takeoff. It was completed in early 1961, and the results were, surprising no one, inconclusive, because how is an animal going to tell you how LSD is affecting them?
Okay.
And was minimal help to the Soviet space agency. In the end, the project was scrapped, and Yuri Gagarin made his trip in 1961 without any hallucinogenic. That's story number 2.
Okay. All right. So there's like a historical sort of like imagery of us sending monkeys into space or chimps into space. That seems to be the common story that's told. And somewhere in the back of my head, I feel like I've heard the story that the first creature in space was a dog, or at least like there was an attempt there, but I don't know. Were any were any laws passed, or any sort of was there any sort of action taken as a result of a dog having died trying to go into space that prevented that from happening again in the near future?
So I'll put it to you this way. So first, remember, we're dealing with Soviet science.
Okay. All right.
Very important. But the idea at the time was, and this is why they sent dogs, rats, monkeys. I believe they've sent ants into space now just to see what's happened. But the reason why is they would much rather test a lot of this new technology with an animal than a human.
Okay.
Right? And that's intrinsic. That's one of those scientific beliefs that you always do animal testing before you do human testing. Now, I don't know for sure if any laws were passed. Do you want me to look that up, though? Because that is actually a very interesting question.
No, it'd probably take a little bit to research, but your justification...
I'll look that up later and let you know.
Yeah, your justification for why an animal first makes sense. So the end-all justification, or the end-all basis of the story is that a dog was sent, it died. We did on-Earth tests of other animals, also giving them hallucinogenics. The tests were inconclusive. A lot of money wasted by the Soviets. And
that's the Soviet anthem.
Right. And right. And then the first man went into space with no LSD. And it was fine.
Well, and so as I said in the story, this was not the only test they were running in the late 1960s and early 1961. LSD was not the only they weren't just like,
right,
well, the dog died. Let's make these animals trip balls before we send them again. Like they were doing a lot of other things.
Got it. Okay.
This small isolated test I thought was so fascinating because why would you think that in any way
you get some
there
valid
would be
data,
conclusive results?
Right. All right, okay. All right, I'm ready for story 3.
All right, story 3. The Venera mission. In February of 1961, the Soviet Union set its sight further as their Sputnik missions had been successful, and their animal and human test flights were also beginning to be promising, with Yuri Gagarin being the first man in space. And I guess at this point they had launched Sputnik 5. I just wrote Sputnik 5 there, but with no sentence around it. So they had also launched
and then
Sputnik
also
5.
Sputnik 5. Got it.
They started what would be called the Venera mission. The Venera missions had the sole purpose of learning more about our neighbor planet. Do you know which neighboring planet I'm talking about?
I'm going to say Venus because Mars sounds too obvious.
It is Venus.
Okay.
So, USSR set its sight on Venus. So, between the years of 1961 and 1984, the Soviet Union launched 16 different probes to Venus, 13 of which actually entered the atmosphere, and 10 of those actually landed on the surface of the planet. The Venera 7 in 1970 was considered the first man-made object to make a soft landing on the surface of another planet. These were unmanned probes, but the accomplishments could not be understated because of these missions, we learned an incredible amount about the atmosphere and the geology of the planet Venus. However, these missions were not without their failures, as only 2 of the probes had their cameras actually function as they were intended, and even then, the Venera 14, one of their cameras ended up under the exact patch of land that a titanium soil compression probe, meaning it was literally pushing the soil down to read what the ground was made out of. Meaning the compression probe ended up reporting on the compressibility of the lens cap instead of the surface of Venus itself. The Venera project ultimately ended as it was then transitioned into the Vega project, which was the USSR partnering with other countries throughout the EU to do research on Halley's Comet. And in fact, the probe that landed on Halley's Comet was the last Venera probe. And that's story number 3.
That is by far your Jackie Chan story. Right?
I'm aware.
That is your off-the-wall, absolutely insane story. Because the first things we ever landed on another planet. Okay, so you said a planet, right? Or a celestial body?
Sure.
What did you say?
Planet. So
Was
granted,
on Venus.
mind you, a lot of my research is done through websites that may have been very liberal
Sure.
with their terms.
Sure.
Venus is considered a planet, so I stand by what I said.
No. I mean more like, I'm curious if we landed something on the moon first, right?
Now the moon's not a planet, so yeah, I see what you're
Correct, right. So my thoughts go that that's crazy, but also your compression probe thing is real specific. And that's interesting. That would be a fascinating reason something would go wrong. And I would not have thought up compression probes as a way of figuring out what the surface is made of by determining its resistance to a probe.
You're not a Soviet scientist.
Right.
That's the problem.
You're right. And there's another thing you said that's fascinating to me. Oh, we landed on Halley's Comet? I mean, that's possible for sure, but like...
Landed a probe.
A probe.
We didn't. Yeah, okay.
No, of course people. Yeah. Well, people have only landed on the moon. My question is, how far is Venus and how far is Mars? Which one's closer to Earth?
Good question. Sorry, chat room. I opened you up so I could interact with you, but Nathan's making me Google things.
Yeah.
Mars is 33,926,867 miles away. We're going to go ahead and round that up to 34 million.
Okay.
Venus, no, that's... How far away is Venus from Earth? Oh my God. Did you know Google has a solar system map that they want you to look at?
Yeah, and they want you to no, that's crazy.
Come on.
They want you to get directions. What's the quickest route to Venus?
62 million miles. So Mars is closer.
By a lot.
By a lot. Can't help you. So,
I know. Like, so before you went into story number 3, so here we are. We're in voting land. Let me actually go ahead and open up the poll without looking at the poll. So I think I can just reset the data here really quickly.
I'm back on chat, guys. So if anybody wants to make fun of Nathan through this process, I will laugh with you.
So if I hit complete and then, okay, so we're going to start the poll again. So the poll went live. Again, exclamation point vote and then space, story 1, story 2, story 3. And that's the story that you think is a lie. Now, I'm not going to look. My gut, before you told story number 3, was that a dog didn't die as the first creature in space. The first creature in space wasn't a dog, and it didn't die. And all that's too much. But it does make sense that we would send animals before sending humans. It's a crazy thing to do, to go into space. Just watching the Crew Dragon launch, I was just literally like, I can't believe we do this. I can't believe we send people into space. And we just watched Apollo 13. I know. We sent people a very, very long way. It's a crazy thing to do. So sending a dog first, as sad as it is, makes sense. Your third story, I don't know why. The first thought the Soviets would have is send something to Venus. And I don't know that they would have been successful, even to the degree that you say that they were. Things going wrong in space makes sense. Like data coming back inconclusive makes a ton of sense. The distance of Venus from the Earth versus the distance from Mars, I think that if they were going for something other than the moon, because you said it was 1961.
Correct.
They had sent Sputnik into low Earth orbit and other things. By 1961, saying, F the moon, we're going to Venus, feels just a little too far. So I have to go with my gut. I would be insane to not say that my guess is that story number 3 is a lie.
That's your final answer?
That's my final answer. I'm now going to quickly look at the votes because they're hidden. At the poll. So we're going to look at the poll.
See what everyone else is saying.
Let's just see. We have 2 votes in, and they both say that story number 2 is a lie. So chat is pretty conclusively saying story number 2 is the lie. My guess is story number 3. Let us have it.
So as you know, Nathan, it is not always a good thing to vote in line with chat. So that's one thing working in your favor, except for this time, because number 2 was the lie.
No way! All right,
Number 2
what?
was the absolute lie.
We landed on Venus? Humans went to Venus? Why?
No humans went to Venus.
No, I don't mean that, but you know what I mean. Earth. When I say we, I know we are not part of Russia, but either way, people sent things to Venus and got data back in 1961.
Data and photographs of the surface and geodetic data so that they could understand the shape and composition of the planet.
Man. Oh my gosh. All right.
And again, they successfully got there 13 times.
That's
13.
insane. All right, tell me about your lie. Tell me about your lie.
So I actually have to give a shout out to someone for the lie. If anyone here is familiar with my friend Dan K, Dan K is a huge, he is my go-to on anything space related. That's his passion. He loves talking about the space race. It's one of his favorite subjects. And I told him my true stories. I told him I was talking about the Venera mission, and I told him that I was talking about, well, at the time it was the V2 rocket, but then we, and I said, I'm having a difficult time coming up with a lie, though, because it all seems so outlandish. And he just goes, what if you just said Soviets tested LSD on animals? And I was like, yeah, that works. That could work. Now, what I will say is Laika, the space dog, that part is still true.
How do you spell Laika, by the way?
In space.
L-I-C-A or L-E-I?
Laika.
Okay.
That was the first animal in space, but it died from asphyxiation and lack of oxygen. They were very well aware of what killed Laika.
So they know why. Got it.
And they were then able to correct that by Yuri's fateful trip in 1960.
So they didn't need to go into this whole animal testing phase. Got it.
Correct. But it should be noted, your logic, if you had guessed 2, your logic would have been very flawed because America, the USSR, we sent a ton of to space. Oh boy, monkeys, dogs, rats, you name it, we were sending them up there. So there's not that much concern.
Man,
and a lot made it back alive, but in the beginning, not so. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. All right. Well, we are currently
at a tie.
We're at a tie. We're 0-0. By the next time we do this, we'll have a score at the bottom that just says 0/0. We'll look. But we'll start.
One of us will win this eventually.
Eventually, we'll come up with a goal later. Well, that is BS in history. I hope you learned something. Forget the fake things we told you, because you will find yourself
don't
later.
live with them.
Live with them. See how they feel. No,
Enjoy them.
Yeah, you'll find yourself later thinking about what was my fake about fake martial arts in Germany and us testing LSD on animals. But I also hope that the 66% of this show that was real is interesting and that you learned something today. That is the concept. That is BS in history. Now we are each going to give each other our topics for next week, or for 2 weeks. We're going to do this in two Wednesdays. So we'll go twice a month on BS in history. So we hope you join us. And we have 2 weeks to research and write 3 stories. And Dan, are you ready for your topic?
Oh, I'm ready. In fact, let me write this down because I always forget to write it down.
Yeah, and this is interesting. I can't say it in just one word. I could, but it would be confusing. I want you to tell me 3 stories. All right, ready? I want you to tell me 3 stories about... Okay, so it's June right now. Also, there's a preamble for this. It's June, and we're quite near the longest day of the year. We're near the summer solstice, Dan. And I want to hear 3 stories about European summer solstice or midsummer celebrations or festivals. Now,
okay.
On a quick glance at the midsummer festivals or summer solstice Wikipedia page, there was a list of more than 20 countries who each have their own celebration. I read none of them and I did no research. I've seen the movie Midsummer, that's it. So there should be a lot of opportunity there. I want to know about different festivals that celebrate the summer solstice. And I said European. If there's some very specific reason it's not in Europe, whatever. Just midsummer, summer solstice festivals.
I can keep it to Europe. Don't you worry about that.
There's plenty in Europe.
Yeah, I am sure that will not run out. So, more recently, and this is actually a dedication to my boy Teddy in the chat. More recently, a conversation has been had about Lord of the Rings. Are you familiar with Lord of the Rings?
Very familiar with Lord of the Rings.
Tolkien in general?
Yes, very.
There's a fascinating race of people in Lord of the Rings called elves. Are you familiar with elves?
Yes.
Cool. I want you to tell me 3 stories about the fictional history of what humans have called elves.
Why did you give me this gift? Is it my birthday?
No, I just really think that would be a fascinating topic to talk about because without giving away what will be your topic and ultimately probably part of your story, they don't all look like what Tolkien described. Elves have been very different things throughout human history.
Probably won't even touch it other than referential.
I want to hear about some of these other elves. I want to give some lip service to these other elves that don't get talked about nearly as much. So I think you are the perfect man to do it.
I'm so curious. I want to learn where we even came up with the idea for elves. What is that even based on? Who came up with that? Oh my gosh, I bet some of them are evil. Oh, I've got to stop talking. Oh my gosh, I have so many ideas. Oh man.
Tune in next time for Midsummer Night's Elves.
Midsummer Night's Elves. We have a title for next one. We haven't figured this one out yet. Perfect. We're just over an hour. I had today scheduled for 2, which is perfect. This is probably about an hour, a little over of a podcast. So join us in 2 weeks. I'll also be publishing my whole June schedule today for streaming. We've got it scheduled. So woo, I'm super excited. And so 2 weeks from now, we're going to do another BS in history. J.E. Graves says you just gave Nathan the jackpot. I'm so excited.
It's for those of you in the chat who know Nathan, he always does his best when he's excited about the topic. And I feel like that's the man I need. I want stories that I'm going to look at for like 15 minutes and go, I don't know which one's a lie. I need it. So yes, please. I'm glad. Have this jack.
Perfect. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed BS in history. We're going to put this up on YouTube and stuff later and we'll share it. But tell your friends if you think they enjoy history podcasts. Tell them to join BS in history in 2 more weeks. And thank you all for participating. And we will see you in 2 weeks. Bye. See you.
Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.